I walked out of that courthouse at noon, clutching my divorce papers, when a silver limousine blocked my path. The man inside knew my name, my birthday, even the birthmark on my shoulder. He said he was my father. But here's the twist. My ex-husband worked for his company and had no idea who I really was. What you're about to hear isn't just a divorce story. It's about secrets, lies, revenge, and a family that will do anything to protect their empire. If you love stories with shocking twists, smash that subscribe button right now. You won't believe what happens next. Let me start from the beginning. 3 years. That's how long I survived in the Hayes family mansion. I say survived because that's exactly what it was. When Brandon Hayes married me, I thought I was the luckiest girl in the world. He was charming, successful, and he chose me, a girl who grew up in foster care, who had nothing and nobody. But the moment I stepped into that massive house, I realized I hadn't married into a family. I'd walked into a prison where the warden wore pearls and expensive perfume. Patricia Hayes, my mother-in-law, made sure I knew my place from day one. She'd look at me with these cold blue eyes and say things like, "Brandon could have married anyone. Girls with proper families, proper backgrounds, but he chose you." The way she said "you" made me feel like something stuck to the bottom of her shoe, and Brandon's sister, Jennifer, she was just as bad. They'd have their fancy lunches and never invite me. When I walked into a room, conversations would stop. I was the outsider, the girl with no family, no background, no worth. I worked as a secretary at a small firm downtown, and every penny I earned went straight to the household expenses. Patricia insisted on it. "You're part of this family now, Skylar. You contribute like everyone else." But her children? They never contributed a single dollar. I'd come home exhausted, and Patricia would criticize the way I dressed, the way I talked, even the way I walked. Brandon never defended me, not once. He'd just shrug and say, "Mom's just particular about things. Don't take it personally." But how could I not take it personally when his mother called me worthless at least twice a week? 3 weeks ago, everything changed. I stared at those 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, and for the first time in years, I felt genuine joy. A baby, my baby, someone who would finally be my real family. I planned this whole special dinner to tell Brandon. I bought his favorite wine, made his favorite meal, even wore the blue dress he once said he liked. I never got to tell him. I came home early that day, excited and nervous. I heard sounds from upstairs. At first, I thought maybe Brandon was watching something on his laptop, but as I climbed those stairs, my heart already knew what my mind didn't want to accept. I pushed open our bedroom door, and there they were. Brandon and Jessica, his co-worker he'd mentioned maybe twice in passing. They were in our bed, tangled in our sheets, and they didn't even notice me standing there for a good 10 seconds. When Brandon finally saw me, he didn't look guilty. He looked annoyed that I'd interrupted. Jessica grabbed the sheets, but she didn't look ashamed either. She looked almost triumphant. And then I heard heels clicking on the hardwood floor behind me. Patricia. My mother-in-law had been home the entire time. She'd known what was happening in that bedroom, and she'd let me walk right into it. "Well," Patricia said, smoothing down her perfectly pressed skirt, "I suppose it's time we had an honest conversation, Skylar." She said my name like it tasted bitter. Brandon has been unhappy for quite some time. Jessica comes from a respectable family. Her father owns 3 car dealerships. Her mother is on the country club board. She's the kind of woman who belongs in this house. I couldn't speak. I just stood there, one hand on my stomach where a tiny life was growing, watching my entire world collapse. Brandon climbed out of bed, not even bothering to look embarrassed. "I was going to tell you eventually," he said, pulling on his shirt. "This marriage was a mistake from the start. You have to admit that." "A mistake?" My voice came out as a whisper. "We've been married for 3 years. 3 years of my mother reminding me every single day that I married beneath our station," Brandon shot back. 3 years of you moping around this house like some charity case? Jessica makes me happy. You never did." Patricia stepped closer to me, and I could smell her expensive perfume. It made my stomach turn. I'm going to make this very simple for you, dear. Here's a check for $50,000. Take it, sign the divorce papers, and leave quietly. Or refuse, and I'll make absolutely certain you never find work in this city again. I have connections everywhere, Skylar, everywhere. I looked at that check. $50,000. It was more money than I'd ever seen in my life. But taking it felt like admitting I was exactly what they thought I was, someone who could be bought and discarded. Keep your money, I heard myself say. I'll sign your papers, but I don't want a single thing from this family. Patricia actually smiled. How noble, how utterly pointless, but noble nonetheless. The next week was a blur of cruelty and pain. I stayed in the guest room while Patricia arranged everything with frightening efficiency. She hired the lawyers, scheduled the courthouse appointment, and made sure everyone in her social circle knew that her son was divorcing that girl with no family. Jennifer made a point of bringing Jessica to the house every single day, parading her around like she'd already won some prize. And then I lost the baby. I woke up one morning with terrible cramps and blood on the sheets. I drove myself to the hospital, sat in that emergency room alone, and heard the doctor tell me there was no heartbeat anymore. The stress, the trauma, my body just couldn't hold on. I didn't tell anyone. What would be the point? Brandon didn't want this baby anyway. He'd made that crystal clear. The day of the divorce, Brandon didn't even show up to the courthouse. He sent his lawyer instead. I sat in that cold room with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, signing paper after paper, officially erasing 3 years of my life. The lawyer, a man in an expensive suit who wouldn't look me in the eye, pushed the final document across the table. You're entitled to nothing from the marriage as per the agreement. Do you understand? I understood perfectly. I signed my name one last time, took my copy of the papers, and walked out into the bright afternoon sun. It was one of those perfect spring days, warm and clear, the kind of day that makes you feel like the world is full of possibilities. But I felt completely hollow. I had one small bag with my clothes, $47 in my wallet, and nowhere to go. I stood on the courthouse steps, trying to figure out my next move. I needed to call my old landlord, see if that tiny studio apartment was still available. I needed to start over, again. Story of my life, really. Always starting over, always alone. That's when the silver limousine pulled up. At first, I thought it was for someone else. Rich people got divorced all the time, right? But the car stopped directly in front of me, blocking my path down the stairs. The engine purred softly, and I could see my own reflection in the spotless paint. Then the back door opened, and a man stepped out. He was probably in his late 50s, tall and distinguished-looking, with gray hair and a perfectly tailored suit. But it was his eyes that stopped me cold. They were filled with tears, and he was staring at me like he'd seen a ghost. "Skylar Monroe," he said, and his voice cracked on my name. "Born April 15th, 1997. You have a birthmark on your left shoulder. You were adopted by the Monroe family when you were 3 days old." My blood ran cold. "Who are you? How do you know all of that?" He took a step closer, and I saw his hands were shaking. "My name is Raymond Sterling, and I've been searching for you for 28 years. He paused, and a tear actually rolled down his cheek. "Skylar, I'm your father." I laughed. I actually laughed out loud because what else do you do when a stranger tells you something completely insane on the worst day of your life? "That's impossible. My parents abandoned me. I have no family." "You have me," he said firmly. "Please, just get in the car. Give me 1 hour to explain everything. If you don't believe me after that, I'll take you anywhere you want to go. But there's something you need to know about your ex-husband's family, something that involves you more than you realize." Maybe it was because I had nowhere else to go. Maybe it was because something in his eyes looked genuine. Or maybe I was just so tired of being alone that even a crazy stranger seemed better than nothing. I picked up my bag and got in the car. The inside of the limousine was like nothing I'd ever seen. Soft leather seats, a small bar, screens built into the walls. Raymond sat across from me and immediately pulled out a sealed envelope. "Before I tell you everything, you need to see this." He handed it to me with shaking hands. Inside was a DNA test result. My name on one side, Raymond Sterling on the other. Probability of paternity, 99.9%. I stared at those numbers, trying to make sense of them. I had it done 2 weeks ago, Raymond said quietly. I've been following you, watching from a distance. I know how awful that sounds, but I had to be sure, and then I saw this. He pulled out a photograph. The woman in the picture took my breath away. She looked exactly like me. Same eyes, same nose, same smile. She was maybe 25 in the photo, wearing a simple yellow dress, laughing at whoever was taking the picture. Her name was Caroline, Raymond said, his voice thick with emotion. She was the love of my life. She was 27 years old when this photo was taken, and she was 8 months pregnant with you. I couldn't stop staring at the picture. It was like looking at myself in costume. What happened to her? She was murdered. Raymond's voice went flat. And the people who did it are the same people who just put you through hell for 3 years. That's when he told me everything. 28 years ago, Raymond was engaged to Caroline. She came from a wealthy family, the Hayes family. Yes, that Hayes family. Patricia Hayes was Caroline's younger sister, my aunt. Caroline's parents were drowning in debt despite their fancy house and reputation. They owed money to dangerous people, and they were desperate. When Caroline got pregnant and told them she was marrying Raymond, her father saw an opportunity. Raymond had built a successful business, was worth millions even back then, but Caroline's father didn't want to just get help. He wanted control of Raymond's fortune, and he didn't want to share it with Caroline. So they made Caroline disappear. She was 8 months pregnant when they took her. They told everyone she'd gone to stay with relatives in Europe. Raymond searched everywhere, hired investigators, called in every favor he had, but the Hayes family had money and connections. They knew how to hide someone. 3 months later, Raymond got a call from a hospital 2 states away. Caroline had died in childbirth. The baby had been stillborn. Both bodies cremated immediately. No service, no chance for Raymond to say goodbye. But I never believed it, Raymond said, leaning forward. Something felt wrong. I kept investigating for years. I spent my entire fortune trying to find the truth. And 10 years ago, I finally found a nurse who was willing to talk. She'd been in that delivery room. Caroline did die, but the baby didn't. You didn't. You were alive and healthy, and Caroline's father paid the doctors to falsify the death certificate. They arranged an illegal adoption and made sure all the records were buried. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Patricia knew. She knew who I was. She recognized you the moment Brandon brought you home, Raymond confirmed. You look exactly like your mother. Patricia must have panicked. If you and Brandon got serious, if you ever found out who you really were, I might learn the truth. I might investigate Caroline's death again. So she made sure you stayed powerless. She kept you close but controlled, made you feel small and worthless. And when it was time, she had Brandon discard you like garbage. He pulled out more documents, phone records showing Patricia had contacted the old adoption agency 3 years ago, emails between Patricia and her mother discussing the situation, bank records showing payments to lawyers who specialized in sealing adoption files. It was all there, the entire conspiracy. Brandon doesn't know, Raymond added. I don't think he has any idea. Patricia told him you were just some girl with no family, and he believed her. But Jessica, that relationship started long before he met you. Patricia set the entire thing up. She convinced Brandon to pursue you, to marry you quickly, to keep you isolated. You were never his wife. You were a threat she needed to neutralize. I thought about those 3 years. Every cruel word from Patricia. Every time she made me feel worthless. Every time Brandon sided with his mother over me. It was all calculated, all designed to break me down so completely that I'd never ask questions about who I really was. There's more, Raymond said quietly. Patricia's husband, Donald, works for my company. He's a mid-level manager in the finance department. And your ex-husband? Brandon just got hired there last month. He has no idea I own Sterling Industries. Neither of them know who I am. I looked up at him and something cold settled in my chest. What are you going to do? Raymond shook his head. This isn't about what I'm going to do. This is about what you want to do. I built an empire while I searched for you, Skylar. Sterling Industries is worth billions now. It's all yours if you want it. But more than that, I want justice for your mother, for Caroline, for what they did to both of you, but only if that's what you want. I thought about my mother, a woman I'd never met, who died bringing me into this world. I thought about how Patricia had stood there in that bedroom, smirking while her son humiliated me. I thought about every cruel word, every dismissive glance, every time they made me feel like I was nothing. I want them to know, I said slowly. I want them to know exactly who I am, and then I want to watch everything fall apart. Raymond smiled, and for the first time, I saw where I got my stubbornness. You have your mother's fire. She would be so proud. The next week was a complete transformation. Raymond took me to his penthouse, a stunning apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. He had a team waiting, stylists, consultants, lawyers. My plain clothes were replaced with elegant suits and dresses. My hair was professionally cut and styled, but the real change was internal. Raymond gave me access to everything: company files, financial records, legal documents. I studied them all, learning about the business, about the people who worked there, about Patricia's husband Donald and his suspicious financial activities. Donald had been embezzling money for years, small amounts at first, then larger sums. Raymond had known about it for months but hadn't acted. He'd been waiting. For me. Brandon's resume was also interesting. He'd lied about his education, inflated his experience, and only got the job because Patricia called in a favor with a director she knew. And Jessica's family company? They owed Sterling Industries $14 million, a debt that was about to come due. 1 week after my divorce, I walked into Sterling Industries' main conference room. The board meeting was already in session. 20 people sat around that massive table, including Donald Hayes. He looked nervous, kept wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. Brandon sat in the corner taking notes. He was so junior he didn't even have a seat at the table. Then Raymond walked in, and I walked in beside him. The room went silent. Raymond moved to the head of the table, and I stood next to him, wearing a navy blue suit that probably cost more than Brandon spent on our entire wedding. "Ladies and gentlemen," Raymond began, "I want to introduce you to someone very special. This is my daughter, Skylar Sterling. As of today, she'll be serving as Vice President of Operations." I watched Donald's face go pale. I watched his eyes move from me to Raymond and back again, and I could see the moment everything clicked. The moment he realized who I was. Brandon didn't recognize me at first. The haircut, the clothes, the way I carried myself. It was all so different from the timid woman who'd signed those divorce papers. But when the meeting ended and people started filing out, he approached me. "Skylar?" He said it like a question, like he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. "Is that really you?" I looked at him, this man I'd thought I loved, and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no pain, just complete indifference. "Mr. Hayes, I believe you used to be married to someone with that name." His face went red. "What are you doing here? What's going on?" "Security will escort you out," I said calmly. "You see, we have a strict policy against employees who falsify their credentials. Your resume claimed you had an MBA from Columbia. You actually dropped out of community college. We can't have liars working here." 2 security guards appeared at his elbows. Brandon started protesting, trying to explain, but I'd already turned away. The last thing I heard was his voice echoing down the hallway as they removed him from the building. Donald tried to run. He actually made it to the parking garage before Raymond's security team stopped him. The police were already there, waiting. Years of embezzlement, all documented, all ready to present in court. But Patricia, I wanted to face her myself. She came to the Sterling Industries building that afternoon, storming past security, demanding to see Raymond. They brought her directly to his office, where I sat behind his massive desk. "You!" she hissed when she saw me. "How dare you? You're supposed to be nothing. You're supposed to be nobody." "Hello, Aunt Patricia," I said quietly. "I think we need to talk about my mother." I watched the color drain from her face. watched her legs actually buckle. She grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. "That's right," I continued. "Caroline, your sister, the one you helped murder." "I didn't. That's not—" Patricia's usual composure completely shattered. "You can't prove anything." "Actually, I can." Raymond stepped into the office from the adjoining room. "I've spent 28 years gathering evidence, Patricia. I know about the hospital. I know about the doctor your father paid off. I know about the adoption. And I know about you." Patricia collapsed into the chair, her face gray. And then, maybe because she realized she was caught, maybe because the guilt had been eating at her for 3 decades, she started talking. She told us everything. How she'd always been jealous of Caroline, the pretty one, the favorite. How she'd convinced their parents that Caroline was going to destroy the family by marrying Raymond. How she'd suggested hiding Caroline away just until the baby was born, just until they could figure things out. But Caroline fought back. She tried to escape twice, and the second time she fell down a flight of stairs. Or maybe she was pushed. Patricia's voice got very quiet when she talked about that part. Caroline went into premature labor. The baby was born healthy, but Caroline was bleeding internally. They could have saved her. Should have saved her. But Patricia's father made a choice. Let Caroline die, falsify the records, get rid of the baby, and pretend none of it ever happened. Raymond would grieve and move on. The family would keep their secrets. Everyone would win. Except Caroline died in agony, and I grew up alone. "I panicked when Brandon brought you home," Patricia admitted, tears running down her face. "You looked so much like her, but I thought if I kept you close, if I controlled you, you'd never find out. I never meant for it to go on so long. I thought Brandon would divorce you after a few months, but he was too weak to do it himself, so I had to arrange everything with Jessica." Raymond recorded every word. And when Patricia finally finished talking, when she realized what she'd admitted to, the police were already walking through the door. They arrested her right there in the office. Conspiracy, fraud, possible involvement in Caroline's death. Her lawyer tried to argue she was confused, that she didn't know what she was saying, but the evidence was overwhelming. Brandon called me that night, crying. He claimed he didn't know, that his mother had manipulated him too, that he was sorry. I listened to his voicemail once and then deleted it. Jennifer, his sister, sent me an email. She admitted she'd always felt guilty about how they'd treated me. She said she wanted to testify against her mother if it would help. I appreciated that at least. Not everyone in that family was completely rotten. Jessica? She dropped Brandon the second his mother was arrested. Turns out she was only interested in the Hayes family name and connections. Once those were gone, so was she. 3 months later, I stood at my mother's grave. It took weeks to find where they'd buried her, in an unmarked plot in a cemetery 4 hours away. Raymond and I bought her a proper headstone. Caroline Sterling, beloved daughter, loving mother, forever remembered. I put yellow flowers on her grave, her favorite according to Raymond. "I found him, Mom," I whispered. "Dad never stopped looking for me, and I made them pay. I made them all pay for what they did to you, to us." Raymond stood beside me, his hand on my shoulder. "She would be so proud of you," he said. "You're exactly like her, strong, stubborn, and impossible to break." We stood there for a long time, just the two of us, finally complete. I'd lost a family that never wanted me, that tried to destroy me, but I'd gained something so much more valuable. The father who never stopped searching, who spent 3 decades and a fortune trying to find the truth. They thought I was nobody, an orphan with no family, no power, no future. Patricia and Brandon and that entire cruel family built their lives on a secret, on a lie they thought would stay buried forever. But blood doesn't lie, and the truth always surfaces. My ex-husband's family destroyed my mother and tried to bury me. Instead, they built their lives on top of a secret that would eventually crush them. I didn't just walk away from my divorce that day. I walked straight into my destiny. And now, standing at my mother's grave with my father beside me, running a billion-dollar company, living the life my mother never got to have, this is my revenge. Not just destroying the people who hurt us, but living well, living freely, living as exactly who I was always meant to be. Skylar Sterling, daughter of Caroline and Raymond Sterling, no longer nobody, no longer powerless, finally home. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories. Comment below, "Justice served," if you think I did the right thing. Remember, sometimes the people who try to destroy you are actually leading you exactly where you're meant to be. Share this with someone who needs to hear that karma is real and revenge is sweetest when it's wrapped in truth. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.
Thank you for listening to this story until the end. Hopefully every moment, every detail in the story has brought you emotions, thoughts, and maybe a little joy or motivation. Thank you for spending time with us, and hope that the next stories will continue to accompany you and touch your heart.